Okay, I'm back. Sorry. Hopefully, I think we started over again, so I'm gonna have to start over again. I got interrupted. Home life, you know. And anyway, uh, this is about the Marianas Islands, and this is a battle that took place. It's going to take place, ironically, really in June of 1944, and we'll come back to that when we go back to the Eastern Theater, European Theater, and look at D-Day. It's in the same time frame. But the big thing about the Marianas Islands is, and I'm gonna send you a map. My 022 history group is a two-prong attack in the Pacific. Into the Central Pacific is thrusting is Nimitz, Admiral Nimitz, out of the Pearl region. He's the one we last left off when we looked at Tarawa, get off the beach. And then you got MacArthur, good old Dugout Doug, remember from the Philippines, coming up out of the Southern Pacific, and they're going to end up joining together. But the Marianas become a very important, crucial part. A long time ago, AT&T used to have a commercial, and their theme was "Reach out and touch someone." That's what this is about. The United States has decided that this is the prime location to take the Japanese off these islands, and the three main islands that we're going to deal with, and one we're going to talk about, only one, is Saipan. Okay, Tinian. I'm going to mention that because that's very important. And then you got Guam in that region. And so what happens is the Americans are going to sweep the Japanese off, and then what they're going to do is use those as bases of operation, bombers, B-29s. They're going to start delivering massive bombing raids on Japan. And this is the beginning of the end. This is a location they can operate out of. So in a way, it's almost like the European theater. Now, the Marianas Island, about 31,500 Japanese are on Saipan. This is one that our focus is on. And they realize what's going to happen. I'm not going to get into all that. We've got codes that we've picked up from the Japanese. There's been some other things that have occurred where we get an understanding, and the Japanese do as well. What we do is we send a group of guys called frogmen back then. The frogmen later on leap into these guys called seals down the road, but the frogmen have been sent up to kind of patrol. This is an advanced group. Scouts, and they're trying to figure out, where this landing is going to take place. It kind of tips it off to the Japanese, but they knew, look, the Americans are out there and they're coming. The Japanese Navy's around down in the South Pacific, but they don't want to get away from their oil reserves, so they're a little reluctant to come out. What's going to happen, though, is the Japanese Navy is going to come out under a guy named Toyoda, not the truck. This is Tyoda, kind of like Yoda, but with a O in front. And so the whole idea is they're going to come up eventually and be drawn out. And the American submarines are going to pick up on these guys. And they're going to end up sinking two Japanese aircraft carriers. And what the Marianas Islands really come out to in the naval engagement, there's always a naval engagement basically and a land engagement going on when you look at the Pacific in most cases. And the Marianas, this becomes known as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. And it comes from an American pilot. So this is the aircraft. And this is the key to this, is the Americans take out, and their goal is to take out the Japanese aircraft there on the Marianas Islands, on places like Saipan and Tinian, and then eliminate that. And the Japanese got about 170 planes. They're really not well prepared, is what I'd argue for this. And the Americans are just going to end up with the air superiority, and they're going to end up just shooting and taking out tons of Japanese aircraft, about 219, 220 total, if I'm right. And then they're going to end up inflicting tremendous damage on the Japanese, that remnant of the Navy that came out to fight. But this is the idea of the integration of the warfare. You got air, you got naval, and then you have the soldiers coming in, the Marines. The term "the turkey shoot" comes from one of the pilots, and I can't remember his name. And if you remember, please let me know. Where he says, "Oh, it's just a big old turkey shoot out here," and so he's plucking away at the Japanese, and this called it a great turkey shoot, just like shooting turkeys. And so the Americans, this is a huge victory if you haven't already kind of got the foreshadowing of this. Anyway, finally the land assault takes place, and it's about 20,000 Marines are going to hit Saipan. And Saipan's a horrifying thing to study. It's like any of the other naval or the land engagements, the islands. The Japanese are determined to survive. They're determined to die for their emperor, and the Americans are determined to take the island. And so as you go through this war, as you go through this battle, excuse me, what you end up by the time it's done and said and done is the Marianas Islands up with about 90% Japanese killed on the island. And this is in part due to some suicides. The commander of the island commits suicide, and then you have these bonsai charges the Japanese are still utilizing, and the Americans are killing them off in this kind of a sense. The Marianas Islands also begins to see the use of the flamethrowers, items like this. By the end of it, the Americans, you have about 16,500 total casualties. You also have an army group that lands as well to bring up support and reinforcements. So it's not just all Marines, but it's not good, not fun. It's very hot. This is a very hot engagement when you read the literature, meaning the soldiers' accounts and so on like this. These are upward temperatures, 100, 105. It's a very dense climate. Can you imagine? Because you're engaged in the enemy. It's not like at the factory you have these hourly shifts, and this is constant engagement. The concern of where the Japanese are, the snipers are at. This we saw in Guadalcanal, and it just completely repeats. It's a template, really, basically. And so what the other part I want to get with the Marianas is two other things real quick. I want to give you the bigger view, and then this other one thing's the closer view of it, meaning the micro view. Tinian, I'm not going to get into the battle itself, but the island of Tinian is taken by the Marines as well, the Americans. And so what's going to happen is why Tinian matters so much is because on Tinian, in the old days, you flew over Tinian, you could look down and it looked like this big pencil. And what that is this massive landing strip that the Americans have constructed. These group of guys called CBs. The C and the B is for a construction tag, but it really CBs, SEABEES is what they become known as, CBs. And this construction brigade goes around, they start building. They build very quickly. And by the way, hang on to that because we'll talk about that after World War II with a guy named Levitt, last name Bill Levitt, on Levitt Towns. Maybe I'll even play a little Billy Joel if I can find my piano. I can't play piano, but I'll try to fake it for you. And so the whole idea, but I'm Billy, so I could kind of, I love Billy Joel. I could kind of be the piano man, basically. But the idea here is Tinian, because this is where the Enola Gay is going to take off. This is where you're going to get the atomic bomb. So the Marianas play this idea, reach out and touch the Japanese. You're not going to have these long-range bombing campaigns, B-29s. And by the way, that's the other reason from the Marianas in the Pacific, we're going to get to the next two big ones, Iwo Jima and Okinawa, because you just get closer. And the idea is to begin these massive round, regular bombing, and that would then bring the Japanese down to their knees. Because this coincides with the European theater, because they're both fortresses. Fortress Japan, Fortress Europe. But the one thing, I believe it was Churchill said, they have the Atlantic Wall, okay, in the European theater with Hitler's famous Atlantic Wall. And Japan has these series of islands. There are these stones you have to hop across. It is their defensive network being worn down, their wall. But there's no roof to the walls. Bombing. And so the 21st Bombing Command, specifically in the Pacific Theater, and also the bombing command that's coming out of Italy, but mainly, more likely, the study would be out of England, and they're beginning to bomb areas like Schweinfurt and regions like this, these heavily dense industrial areas. But it's definitely hitting the morale of the people. Let me tell you that. But anyway, that's the idea of the Marianas. So these two are kind of linked. And they're both happening at the same time, June of 44 and June of 44. When we talk about D-Day, we're going to switch to this. And the other part behind this is the planning, the big three. Remember the big three: Winston Churchill of the British Prime Minister, and then our own FDR, the American president, and then Joseph Stalin. And Stalin is really adamant the second front. He hasn't seen it yet. And this is part of the idea of where do you put your forces. And this leads into the idea of what's going to happen in that European theater, this cross-channel invasion. You're going to have to divert tremendous amounts to make this work, because this is really tense. And we'll get into D-Day here pretty soon. In fact, that's where I'm going to probably jump here by the end of the week. I am compelled to jump there first, I think, then come back to the Pacific with Iwo Jima and Okinawa, because that's where we'll end. And I want to get the men and the material over there. And that leads back to your essay question about the home front. If you think of D-Day, getting this all set up, you have to think of the immense amount of material you're going to need. and this is going to require an unbelievable feat of Herculean effort for the American average American at home, and also those hitting the beaches. This is a tremendous time of sacrifice. And we'll get into D-Day. It's quite a bit, and I think the more important thing to study is the planning leading up to it. And by the way, don't let me forget D-Day, right? D is for deception, just as much as anything else. And I'll get into this idea with you later. It's a wonderful thing. And I'll give you some ideas of what you want to read if you want to get into this, for these kind of campaigns. Hey, I miss you guys. Thank you very much. Stay safe. Do your part. We all do our part. I will see you tomorrow at 0900 on live feed, and we'll actually get to talk a little bit about some history if you hopefully you should, and see if you have any questions and see how you're doing overall. But thank you guys very much. I miss you. Bye bye.